Number 1. Rainer Schimpf inside a Bryde's whale's mouth. Imagine the exact moment the light disappears. 1 second you are floating in warm, silvered water thick with fish, and the next there is pressure around your whole body and a darkness so total you cannot tell up from down. That is what happened to Rainer Schimpf on February 28, 2019, about 40 kilometers off Port Elizabeth on the southern coast of South Africa. Schimpf is a dive tour operator and wildlife photographer with more than 15 years of experience in these waters. That morning, he was in the sea to document a sardine run, one of the greatest feeding events on the planet, when millions of sardines are herded into tight, panicking bait balls, and every predator for miles arrives to feed. Sharks came, dolphins came, gannets fell from the sky like arrows. And a Bryde's whale, a filter feeder that can grow to 15 meters long and weigh as much as 25 tons, came up from below, with its mouth wide open to engulf the same ball of fish that Schimpf was filming. He never saw it coming. The whale scooped him in from behind, and suddenly his upper body was inside the animal's mouth. Schimpf later said he felt the pressure close around his torso and knew instantly what had happened. Here is the part that saved his life. He did not fight, he held his breath, held onto his camera, and stayed still. Because he reasoned that if he struggled, the whale might panic and dive to the depths with him still inside. A Bryde's whale physically cannot swallow something the size of a person. Its throat is narrow, built for small schooling fish and krill, not for men in dry suits. So after a few seconds of confusion, the whale did the only thing it could. It opened its mouth and spat him back out into the sea. Schimpf surfaced, shaken but unhurt, his suit intact. The whole thing had lasted a heartbeat. His skipper, Heinz Toperzer, and photographer Claudia Weber-Gabert had watched it unfold from the boat. Within days, the story had traveled around the world. What haunts Schimpf is not pain, because there was none. It is the memory of the darkness, the crushing grip, and the certainty, for those few seconds, that he was inside a living animal. He holds no grudge against the whale. It was an accident of being in the wrong patch of chaos at the wrong instant. And it raises a strange question. How many different ways can the ocean put a human being inside another creature? Number 2. Erich Nerhus, swallowed head first by a great white. The water off Cape Howe on the border of New South Wales and Victoria in Australia is cold, green, and rich with life. It is also great white country, drawn there by seals and dense fish. On January 24, 2007, Erich Nerhus, a 41-year-old commercial abalone diver, was working the bottom at around 6 to 8 meters when a great white shark, estimated at 3 meters long, rose out of the murk and took his head and shoulders into its mouth. Think about that. Not his arm, not his leg, his head. Nerhus was plunged into darkness inside the jaws of an apex predator, and he could feel the teeth pressing in around him. He should not have survived. The reason he did comes down to a single piece of equipment. Nerhus was wearing a lid-weighted vest, the kind abalone divers use to stay pinned to the seabed. That vest took the force of the bite and kept the teeth from crushing his skull and chest. And Nerhus, even inside the mouth of the shark, kept his head. He remembered the one thing that sometimes works. He drove his fingers into the shark's eye, the softest and most sensitive spot on the animal. The shark let go. Nerhus fought his way to the surface, bleeding from deep lacerations with a broken nose and puncture wounds across his torso, but alive. His teenage son, Mark, was working on the boat above and helped haul his father out of the water. The most astonishing detail is that this was not Erich Nerhus's first shark encounter. He had survived one before, years earlier, which made him one of the very few people to live through 2 shark attacks. Abalone diving is one of the most dangerous jobs in Australia precisely because of moments like this, where a diver on the bottom is exposed and blind to what is coming from behind. Marine biologists point out that great whites often make an exploratory bite. Humans are not their preferred food, so the animal frequently releases after the first taste. But knowing that, in theory, is very different from feeling the jaws close over your head in cold green water. Nerhus recovered from his wounds. And then, in the detail that says everything about the strange pull of the sea, he went back to diving. The memory never left him, but neither did the work. Number 3. Nan Hauser, shielded by a humpback whale. Not every haunting encounter is an attack. Some are stranger than that. In October of 2017, off the island of Rarotonga in the Cook Islands, marine biologist Dr. Nan Hauser had spent nearly 3 decades studying humpback whales when one of them began to do something she'd never seen. a humpback, a creature weighing around 22 tons, approached her in the water and started pushing her with its enormous head. Then, it tucked her against its body and even tried to shelter her beneath one of its huge pectoral fins. For about 10 minutes, the whale would not leave her alone, nudging, lifting, and shielding. Hauser was frightened. She knew that a single flick of that tail could kill her, and she could not understand why the animal was handling her so insistently. She stayed as calm as she could, because panic could turn a gentle push into a fatal one. It was only later, when she looked at the footage from her cameras and a drone overhead, that she understood. A tiger shark, roughly 4.5 meters long, had been circling in the water nearby. A second humpback had been slapping the surface with its tail, a behavior sometimes linked to warning. Hauser came to believe the whale had been trying to protect her from the shark, keeping its body between her and the predator. This is not as far-fetched as it sounds. In 2016, researcher Robert Pittman and colleagues published a study documenting more than 100 cases of humpback whales interfering with orca hunts, sometimes rushing in to protect completely different species, from seals to sunfish. Scientists still debate what was really happening off Rarotonga. Was the whale deliberately protecting her, or simply reacting to a predator in its space with Hauser caught in the middle? She was left bruised from the encounter. She was also left profoundly moved, feeling that an animal she had devoted her life to studying had, in some way she could not fully explain, watched over her. Hauser, who serves as president of the Center for Cetacean Research and Conservation on Rarotonga, said it was the first time in 28 years of research that a whale had ever done this to her. The footage went around the world in early 2018, and scientists still cite it in discussions of how much whales may understand about the world around them, and the reason it haunts is the ambiguity of it. In the very same 10 minutes, there was a gentle giant and a lethal hunter, and a human being caught between them, unsure until the end which one was which. Number 4. Paul Nicklen and the leopard seal. Paul Nicklen is one of the most celebrated wildlife photographers in the world, but in 26, in the freezing water of Antarctica, he was simply terrified. He had gotten into the sea to photograph leopard seals, animals that can reach 3.5 meters and 500 kilograms, with a jaw full of teeth, and a fearsome reputation as hunters of penguins and other seals. A massive female approached him. Nicklen braced for the worst. Instead, the seal did something that upended everything he thought he knew about the species. She caught a live penguin and brought it to him. She released it near his camera, apparently offering it to him. When he did not react, she caught it again and brought it back. Over roughly 4 days, the seal kept presenting him with penguins, first lively ones, then weakened ones, then dead ones, as though she were trying to feed a creature that clearly had no idea how to feed itself. At times, she would blow bubbles in his face or open her mouth in a threat display, seeming almost frustrated that this useless, soft predator would not eat. Nicklen came to believe the seal had decided he was an incompetent hunter who needed help surviving. The images he captured became some of the most famous wildlife photographs ever taken, and he has told the story in a widely watched talk. What gives the encounter its weight is the shadow behind it. In 23, just a few years earlier, a leopard seal had killed a researcher named Kirsty Brown, dragging her underwater while she snorkeled in Antarctica. So Nicklen knew exactly what this animal was capable of. To be sized up by one of Antarctica's top predators and to be judged not as prey, but as a helpless thing that needed feeding, is its own kind of unsettling. Nicklen went on to co-found a conservation organization inspired in part by encounters like this one. Scientists suggest the seal may have been acting on a misdirected provisioning instinct rather than any conscious kindness. But Nicklen, floating in that black water while an apex predator tried to keep him alive, felt something he never forgot. Even the deep drive to descend, to be in these places at all, comes at a cost the body remembers. Number 5. Herbert Nitsch, the No Limits Freedive injury. Herbert Nitsch was once called the deepest man on Earth, and he earned the title on a single breath. Nitsch, an Austrian and a former commercial airline pilot, was a champion of No Limits freediving, the most extreme discipline in the sport. In No Limits, the diver rides a weighted sled straight down into the depths and then uses an inflatable lift bag to shoot back to the surface. There is no scuba tank, no supply of air, only the breath in your lungs and the will to hold it. On June 6, 2012, off the island of Santorini in Greece, Nitsch attempted to reach 253 meters. He held the existing no-limits world record of 214 meters, set in 27, and he wanted to go deeper than any human ever had. He reached the target depth. But on the way back up, something went wrong. Nitsch blacked out. At 253 meters, the pressure is around 26 times what it is at the surface, enough to compress the lungs to a small fraction of their normal size and to force nitrogen into the blood. Freedivers almost never suffer decompression sickness, the condition scuba divers call the bends because they are not breathing pressurized gas. But at this extreme depth and with Nitsch unconscious and unable to make his planned decompression stops, nitrogen bubbles formed in his blood. He suffered multiple strokes. The damage was severe. Nitsch survived, but he was left with paralysis and serious impairment, and he had to relearn how to do the most basic things, including how to walk. No Limits diving has claimed other lives over the years, and Nitsch's near-death is one of the most studied cautionary examples in the entire sport. His attempt remains contested as an official record precisely because of the blackout and the incomplete ascent. In freediving medicine, his case became a landmark warning about just how dangerous extreme depth can be, even for the most skilled athlete alive. Over the following years, Nitsch made a remarkable partial recovery and returned to diving in gentler forms. But the story stays with everyone who hears it, because it is not a tale of a careless beginner. It is a tale of the single most accomplished diver in his discipline, whose confidence and skill carried him to a place the human body simply cannot survive without paying a price. Sometimes the thing that haunts a diver is not a predator at all. It is the depth itself, and what it takes from those who reach too far into it. Number 6. Erich Ritter and the bull shark bite. Dr. Erich Ritter believed he understood sharks better than almost anyone. He was a shark behavior researcher who argued that sharks could be approached safely if a person controlled their body language and stayed calm, projecting no fear and no prey signals. In 22, off Walker's Cay in the Bahamas, he set out to prove it on camera for a Discovery Channel program about the anatomy of a shark bite. Ritter stood in shallow water surrounded by bull sharks, demonstrating his theories while cameras rolled. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous sharks in the world. They tolerate shallow and even brackish water, they are powerfully built, and they have one of the highest bite forces of any shark relative to their size. They can reach well over 3 meters. As Ritter stood there, explaining how to remain safe, a bull shark struck. It seized his lower left leg and tore away a large portion of his calf muscle in a single bite. The water bloomed red. Ritter, the expert who had just been describing how not to get bitten, was now bleeding to death on live camera. He nearly did die at the scene. The bleeding was catastrophic, and only fast emergency action and evacuation saved him. He survived, but he needed extensive reconstructive surgery and a long rehabilitation, and he carried the damage for the rest of his life. The footage became one of the most watched real shark bites ever recorded, and it complicated everything Ritter had been arguing. Critics pointed out that the water was full of bait and chum for the sharks, which raised the animal's feeding drive far beyond normal. Ritter continued his research after recovering and kept writing about shark behavior, but the incident became a permanent caution in the debate about baited shark encounters and the people who claim to be able to tame wild predators. What haunts about this one is the reversal. The person most certain he was in control, the one teaching everyone else how to stay safe, was the one who was maimed in front of the lens. Not all of the ocean's horrors come with teeth, though. Some are far stranger. Number 7. The Giant Pyrosome. Picture a diver swimming beside a translucent tube, hollow and open at one end, drifting in the dark water and glowing with a soft, cold light. The tube is longer than the diver is tall. It looks like a single ghostly creature, but it is not one animal at all. It is thousands. This is a pyrosome, and encountering a large one is one of the most surreal experiences in the ocean. A pyrosome is a colony made up of thousands of tiny animals called zooids, each only a few millimeters long, packed together into a gelatinous tube. Each zooid filters seawater for food, and together they slowly jet the whole colony through the sea. Their name means fire body, because when they are disturbed, they light up with intense bioluminescence, and that light can ripple across the whole colony like a wave. The largest species, Pyrosome spinosum, can grow to 18 or even 20 meters long, a glowing tunnel big enough for a diver to fit inside. In 2017, footage from off Tasmania showed a diver gliding alongside one of these giants, dwarfed by a creature that is really a floating city of clones. And here's a fact that makes them stranger still. Pyrosomes are tunicates, which means that despite looking like jellyfish, they are actually more closely related to us, to vertebrates, than they are to a jellyfish. They can also appear in staggering numbers. In 2017, a massive pyrosome bloom spread along the Pacific coast of North America, from Oregon all the way up to Alaska, clogging fishing gear and baffling scientists, and it was linked to unusually warm water. Pyrosomes are completely harmless to humans, and that is exactly what makes the encounter so uncanny. There's no threat, no teeth, no attack. There's only a vast, glowing, breathing thing that blurs the line between one creature and many, drifting silently in the dark. Divers who have swum inside one describe it as dreamlike and deeply strange, the kind of sight that rewires your sense of what life can even be. But the ocean also hides horrors that are all about grip and suddenness. Number 8. The Moray eel that would not let go. Most divers who have spent time on a reef carry a quiet fear of moray eels, and the anatomy of these animals explains why. A moray has 2 sets of jaws. The first is the one you can see, lined with backward curving teeth. The second is hidden in its throat. These are called pharyngeal jaws, and when the moray bites, this second set of jaws launches forward into the mouth, clamps onto the prey, and drags it back down the throat. In 2007, researchers Rita Mehta and Peter Wainwright at the University of California, Davis described this mechanism in the journal Nature, and it is unique among vertebrates in the way it is used. It was quickly compared to the creature from the film Alien. What this means for divers is simple and horrifying. Once a moray clamps down, its curved teeth and that second grip in the throat make it very hard to pull free, and yanking away only tears the wound wider. Morays have poor eyesight and hunt mostly by smell, which is why so many bites happen at dive sites where people hand feed the eels. The animal cannot always tell the difference between a piece of fish and the finger holding it. A green moray can grow to more than 2 meters, and the giant moray of the Indo-Pacific can reach nearly 3 meters and 30 kilograms. There's a detail that unsettles new divers even when nothing is wrong. Morays constantly open and close their mouths, showing their teeth, but this is not a threat. It is simply how they pump water over their gills to breathe. The real danger comes when a moray latches on and will not release. Divers have found their fingers locked in a moray's jaws, forced to wait as calmly as possible for the eel to let go on its own, because fighting it makes everything worse. And even after the eel releases, the bacteria in its mouth can cause serious infections that may need surgery. There's a second, slower danger too. Large morays can carry a toxin called ciguatera in their flesh, which is why eating one can poison a person, though that has nothing to do with the bite itself. At feeding sites in places like the Red Sea and the Caribbean, morays learn to associate the arrival of divers with an easy meal, which is exactly how a curious eel ends up mistaking a hand for food. The advice from experts is almost unbearable in the moment. Stay still. Do not pull. Let it release. It is a very different kind of terror from a shark, quieter and more intimate, and it stays with the divers who have felt that grip. On a wreck, the horror can be a matter of pure scale. Number 9, the Goliath grouper ambush. You often hear it before you see it, a deep percussive boom that you feel in your chest more than your ears. Then, out of a dark opening in a shipwreck, a fish the size of a small car materializes with its mouth already opening. This is the Atlantic Goliath grouper, and for divers and spearfishers off Florida, the ambush is genuinely heart-stopping. The Goliath grouper is the largest grouper in the Atlantic, reaching up to 2.5 meters long and 360 kilograms, which is around 800 pounds. It hunts by suction. In a fraction of a second, it expands its enormous mouth, creating a vacuum so powerful that it pulls fish and crustaceans straight in and swallows them whole. The boom you feel is made with its swim bladder, and the grouper uses it as a warning to intruders, including divers. The most common conflict happens with spearfishers. A diver spears a fish, and a Goliath grouper, which has learned to associate the sound of a spear gun with an easy meal, rushes in to steal the catch, sometimes trying to swallow the fish and the spear together. There is a conservation story woven through this. Goliath groupers were nearly wiped out by overfishing, and in 1990, the United States banned harvesting them entirely. The population slowly recovered, especially in Florida, which is exactly why divers encounter these giants so much more often today. They gather it around wrecks and ledges, and in the late summer they form large spawning aggregations that researchers track by listening for their booming calls. A Goliath grouper can live 30 to 40 years and grow slowly, which is why the species is so vulnerable to being overfished again. Attacks on humans are essentially unrecorded as genuine predation. The grouper is not trying to eat the diver, but when a fish, as long as a person explodes out of a rusted wreck with a boom and a gaping mouth, the primitive part of the brain does not stop to check the science. It simply floods with fear. And that reaction, that pure startle in the dark, is what stays with divers long after they surface. The next giant is even larger and gentler, and somehow no less overwhelming. Number 10. The whale shark, that dwarfed the divers. The whale shark is the largest fish alive, reaching lengths of 18 to 19 meters and weighing more than 20 tons, and it is completely harmless. It is a filter feeder, cruising the warm seas with its mouth open to strain plankton, krill, and fish eggs from the water. Yet divers who meet one almost always describe the same thing, a wave of awe mixed with instinctive fear, because nothing in the human nervous system is prepared for a living creature that large, rising out of the blue toward you. Whale sharks feed by ram filtration and active suction, pushing thousands of liters of water through their gills every hour. Their mouths can be more than a meter wide, but their throats are tiny, and they could not swallow anything large even if they tried. They gather in predictable hotspots around the world, off Isla Holbox in Mexico, off Ningaloo Reef in Western Australia, in the Maldives, and off Djibouti. Every whale shark carries a unique pattern of pale spots and stripes like a fingerprint, and researchers identify individuals using software originally adapted from astronomy, the same kind of pattern matching used to map stars. Whale sharks are listed as endangered, threatened by fishing, ship strikes, and being caught accidentally in nets. They can dive to more than 1,900 meters and travel thousands of kilometers, and they may live somewhere between 80 and 130 years, among the longest lived of all fish. One female caught in 1995 was found to be carrying around 300 embryos. Tourism rules require divers to keep a minimum distance, both to protect the animal and to protect the people. But even at a respectful distance, swimming beside something longer than a bus, with no way to read its intentions, unsettles even seasoned divers. The whale shark is gentle. It has never been a threat. And still, the sight of it triggers something ancient and overwhelming. A reminder that in the water, scale alone can be terrifying. There is one last encounter, though, where the very thing meant to keep a diver safe is the thing that fails. Number 11. The Guadalupe Cage Breach. Guadalupe Island lies about 240 kilometers off the coast of Baja California in Mexico, and for years it was considered one of the greatest places on Earth to cage dive with great white sharks. The water is astonishingly clear, often with more than 30 meters of visibility, and the island's resident colonies of fur seals and elephant seals draw in large great whites, some more than 5 meters long and over 1,000 kilograms. In October of 2016, that clarity captured something few people ever expected to see. A great white lunged at a baited line near a shark cage. Instead of simply taking the bait, the shark became entangled and began to thrash with tremendous force, and in its panic, it punched partway through the steel bars of the cage. A diver was inside that cage at the moment it breached. In the footage, you can see the diver press back into the far corner as the shark thrashes wildly, all teeth and muscle and chaos, in a space that suddenly feels impossibly small. The diver escaped, the shark eventually tore itself free and swam away, and no human was seriously hurt. Experts were quick to explain what had really happened. The shark was not attacking the diver. It had bitten the bait, gotten stuck, and reacted in blind panic, which is a very different thing from a predatory strike. But that explanation does little to soften the video. Cage bars are sized specifically to keep a shark's head from entering, yet a powerful enough animal in a panic can still bend or breach them. The incident reignited a long-running debate about baiting and chumming the water at cage diving operations, and Mexico later tightened the regulations around great white diving at Guadalupe, at times suspending it entirely. What makes this one haunt is different from the others. It is claustrophobic. The whole point of a cage is that it is the one barrier between you and the predator, the thing that makes the danger feel controlled. And in that clear blue water, on camera, the barrier failed with a shark inside it. So why do all 11 of these lodge so deeply in the people who live them? The answer starts with a single shared moment. In every one of these encounters, there is an instant where the diver's sense of control collapses completely. The whale closes its mouth, the shark takes hold, the cage gives way. In that instant, the human brain does something specific. Extreme fear activates the amygdala and burns the memory in with unusual vividness, which is why survivors so often recall the smallest sensory details years later, the exact quality of the darkness, the pressure around the chest, the flash of teeth, the cloud of bubbles. Psychologists sometimes call these flashbulb memories, and the ocean is uniquely good at creating them. On land, fear usually comes with the option to run. Underwater, that option is gone. You are slow, your vision is limited, your air is finite, and the animal is faster and more at home than you will ever be. There is nowhere to go. And yet, the most telling thing about these survivors is what they did next. Rainer Schimpf kept guiding. Erich Nerhus went back to diving with the same sharks that nearly killed him. Nan Hauser continued her whale research. Herbert Nitsch returned to the water in gentler forms. The encounter did not end their relationship with the sea. It deepened it, tangling trauma and compulsion together, so that the very thing that terrified them became the thing they could not leave alone. That contradiction is at the heart of why these stories stay with us. It is worth turning the story around and looking at it from the animal's point of view, because almost none of these creatures were hunting a human being. The Bryde's whale and the whale shark were feeding, and a person simply got in the way of an enormous open mouth. A baleen whale cannot even swallow a human, so the real danger was never being eaten, only being accidentally scooped up and released. The leopard seal was not attacking Paul Nicklen at all. It was, in its own strange way, trying to feed him. The humpback off Rarotonga appears to have been protecting Nan Hauser, or at least reacting to a shark with her caught in between. Even the sharks were not the mindless killers of legend. The bull shark that maimed Erich Ritter struck in water thick with bait and chum, its feeding drive deliberately cranked up for the cameras. The great white at Guadalupe was in a blind panic after biting a baited line, not stalking the diver in the cage. Notice how often that word bait keeps appearing. Chum, hand-feeding, spearfishing, baited lines. Again and again, it is human activity that turns a wild animal's normal behavior into something dangerous. When you understand what the animal was actually doing, the horror shifts. It stops being a story about monsters and becomes something sadder and more honest. A tragic mismatch between a creature following its instincts and a human being who wandered into the wrong moment. The leopard seal thought it was helping. The humpback may have thought it was rescuing. The whales were only eating. Seen this way, the true danger is rarely malice. It is misunderstanding in an environment where a misunderstanding can turn deadly in a second. There is a reason we know about these particular encounters and not thousands of others, and it is not only that they were dramatic, it is that they were recorded. Nearly every story here survives because a camera was running. Paul Nicklen and Nan Hauser are professionals whose images and footage traveled around the world. Erich Ritter's bite was filmed for television. The Guadalupe cage breach and the moment a whale nearly swallowed a diver spread across the internet in a matter of hours. The camera does two things at once. It documents, giving scientists real footage to study behaviors that would otherwise be dismissed as fishermen's tales. and it amplifies, turning one person's private, terrifying few seconds into a shared cultural memory watched by millions. That amplification has a cost, because these rare, spectacular events are the ones that go viral. They shape the public's fear of the ocean far out of proportion to the actual risk. Most people will never be bitten by a shark or scooped by a whale, but the footage makes those outcomes feel common. And in the cases built around feeding tourism, the camera plays an even more uncomfortable role. Sometimes the desire to capture the perfect dramatic shot is part of what put bait in the water and a diver in harm's way in the first place. The lens both witnesses the danger and, now and then, helps to create it. Step back far enough and a pattern comes into view that is really about us, not the animals. Human beings keep going deeper and keep finding new ways to put themselves in the water with things that could kill them. Herbert Nitsch chased a depth record until it cost him his ability to walk, all for the sake of going a few meters further than anyone before. Commercial divers like Erich Nerhus face predators as a routine part of earning a living on the seafloor. Dive tourism now brings people with very little training into close contact with apex predators, sometimes separated from a great white by nothing more than a set of steel bars. And the safety equipment we invent to make all of this possible, the weighted vests, the cages, the sleds, and lift bags, does two things at once. It protects us, and it also lets us take risks we could never have taken otherwise. Every advance in our ability to reach the deep multiplies the number of chances for an extraordinary and sometimes horrifying encounter. Commercial saturation divers live for days under pressure in sealed chambers, breathing exotic gas mixtures so that they can work on the seafloor at depths that would otherwise kill them. And the history of that work is filled with its own quiet catastrophes. The abalone diver on the bottom, the freediver on the sled, the tourist in the cage, the saturation diver in the chamber, the photographer in the Antarctic water. They are all expressions of the same restless drive. We are a land animal that refuses to stay on land, entering over and over an environment we were never built to survive in, held there by tools and nerve and curiosity. So what is it really that haunts these divers? It is not simply the fear of dying, because most of them faced that and carried on. It is something more fundamental. These encounters strip away the modern illusion that human beings are in charge. On land, surrounded by our machines in our cities, we rarely feel our own smallness. But underwater, that comfort vanishes in an instant. We are slow, half-blind, and utterly out of our element, sharing the water with animals that are perfectly adapted to it and completely indifferent to us. The whale did not hate Rainer Schimpf. The whale shark does not care that it terrifies the divers beside it. The ocean itself feels nothing at all. And that indifference, that vast scale and power that simply does not notice us, is the true source of the awe and the dread. What the survivors carry is not only fear. It is a permanently altered sense of their own place in the world, a memory of the exact moment they understood that the control they thought they had was never really theirs to begin with. They returned to the water anyway, changed, humbled, and drawn back by the same thing that frightened them. And somewhere out in the blue, long after the divers have surfaced and the cameras have stopped, the water simply goes still and keeps its secrets and waits